Okay, so I have a follow-up question to my previous discussion about the mating rituals of the platypus. I have not read the question yet, so we're going to do that now. Hold on a second. So you're saying that essentially platypi are the bowerbirds of the mammal kingdom. How has globalization impacted the platypus population size? What with the internet making the purchasing of foreign currency and discounted Halloween costumes easier to purchase? Have these things become more or less important, and what did platypi do before these things were so easily available? Okay, well, um, first of all, the availability of international shipping has definitely made it a lot simpler. Uh, Not necessarily in dealing with the currency, but specifically in dealing with how they. I don't. Their affinity for Queen Elizabeth II costumes. I don't want to call it a fetish. It's not exactly. It's just it. It's it's like it has the same effect as like Barry White CDs do for humans. That's the effect that it has for the platypus. So it is true that the availability of shipping of international shipping, specifically once the internet reached the platypus community, it has definitely seen a big expansion onto the way that I mean like a big expansion into how it's affected their reproductive rates. Um, the um, the contradiction in terms when it comes to the platypus um, in acquiring, like, it's not necessarily that rare. um I mean, it's the rare platypus who is finds more success in their courtship rituals through um, rare currencies. And the problem is that to acquire a more rare currency, they need to have access to larger amounts of more basic currency. So it's like the novelty of it isn't necessarily a factor. Um, there are rare exceptions to this, which is why you will find a certain subset of platypus society that is very interested in salvaging old wrecks, um, like excavating tombs, looking for far more, for ways to acquire ancient currencies that are acquired through labor as opposed to exchanging currency for currency. Um, but uh, that's a very specialized skill set for a lot of platypi. Um, the as to your other questions, what did platypi do before these things were so easily available? Okay, well, the first part is that we don't have records of platypus society before they interfaced with humans. Clearly. I mean, it's let's not be ridiculous. We don't know how to research animals before we find them, so we can only. We can only just hypothesize about what we think, how we think these things worked for them. Um, it's believed that in a pre-human contact society, uh, the platypus would generally try and replace currency with leaves, um, but like basically any sort of like smaller, like colorful representation. Like, yeah, leaves were generally the way that they would go. But as humans expanded into platypus territories, that impulse would be, like, there. Unfortunately, it kind of did interfere with the natural platypus reproductive development, um, and that's kind of where the general the idea it would be there would be some of the more old school platypus who would still try and like stick to using the older ways, using leaves, but it was less successful than the more advanced newer ones who would use human currency, which is of course where the idea comes from that money doesn't grow on trees. You can't rely on that for platypus courtship. um, but yeah, this is of course with the currency, with the representation of the various ruling figures that played into them. A platypus is a very, they're very, they're just, they're very, they're an animal with a lot of ingenuity to them. They're very good at developing their own costuming, their own designs. So that is very specifically the kind of thing that they would handle themselves. But I hope that answers your question. And if anybody has any more questions about this, please feel free to ask. Thank you.